All right, so we are here with Okta, and we're starting with Kaitlyn, who's got Grubhub.
Right. So if you have ever used Grubhub or Uber Eats for that matter, you'll see the price of the thing you're ordering. And it'll be $30 meal. It's kind of expensive, but fine $30 meal for one person. Fine. You push the buy, you go through the cart, and then finally on the last page, when you're about ready to get your meal, they're like, oh, by the way, there's a bunch of extra, tax fees, service fees, and delivery fees. And I know in like California, there's like extra driver fees for living and stuff like that, which is totally just tacked on politically, by the way. Like they could tack it on as something else, but they specifically mention it because they want people to know that their meal is more expensive because California demands that their drivers not be destitute on the streets for some reason. Anyway, so DC has sued Grubhub for those practices because if you're buying a meal for $30, you go to the checkout, you shouldn't be like, oh, it's actually $45, or $50 that you're paying. And apparently Grubhub has a service where they say, oh, you can get free deliveries all the time, it's not a big deal. And it's of course just a lie. If you sign up for that thing, you still have to pay for your deliveries of food and stuff like that. So these, as much as important as these apps are during the pandemic, they can't get away with deceptive business practices, right? If you're going to sell something for $45, just be upfront and be like, okay, you're going to order this meal, it's going to be $45 at a time. Just say no. I know it hurts their bottom line, but there's something to be said about fair business practices. And before I go on, I should say that this article is on The Verge, and it is written by Audie Robertson.
Well, I read another one here, and they said that in addition, Grubhub would have a special, like 20% off. And what they don't tell you is they would pass that on to the restaurant. The Grubhub wouldn't absorb any of that.
Right, yeah.
And the whole thing reminded me of Uber. I mean, I thought one of the greatest things about Uber is when it came out that they were not doing any background checks of their employees, and they were like killing and raping people, they responded by adding a $1 driver safety fee to every ride, and then did absolutely nothing else. They just raised the price, but put the label driver safety fee.
Yeah, it's
yeah, and I think it pays to mention too that with a lot of these like extra fees that are tacked on, the driver actually gets such a small portion of those fees that you've got to tip them on top of it.
Yep. Oh, yep. Anyway, so
and tipping is another issue we should totally just have an entire podcast about, because tipping is not universal in every country, and people treat it like it's expected here in the United States, but it shouldn't be expected. You should, if you're going to offer a service and pay your employees, you should just pay your employees and not expect the kindness of others, to pay it. I mean, it's silly. Anyway,
there you go, being socialist again.
I know. Anyway, it's just the whole thing of tipping needs to go, but no one seems to be willing to do it.
Well, see, the idea was that everyone just has to patiently grab everything, all the money they can, and then the invisible hand will mean the best person will win.
That's totally working out.
Well, it never actually did work out, and that's why we added all sorts of like government controls to it.
One of the other issues with those e-tips is that we have seen in several instances where the person performing the service didn't even get all or maybe even any of the tips that were sent through the service.
Yep.
And they deliberately keep those apps opaque so that it's difficult for the delivery person or the driver to be able to know whether they've been cheated or not.
Yeah. All right. Well, and Liz, you've got the all-important Okta.
Big news this morning.
That's what I thought.
So
we don't know a whole lot about it, but it sure sounds big.
Yeah, and it's that's I think that's an important point in that we don't know all about it. We don't know a lot about it yet. It's really breaking news. I woke up to alerts for this on my phone. It's huge though. Lots and lots of businesses use Okta as their login for their SSO. It's going to have some. If the story is as big as claimed, it's probably going to have some fairly serious ramifications. So. It came out, and the story's been sort of unfolding over time. Apparently, the whole thing started in January, according to the stories. Essentially, these hackers from the Lemus group, who are also in the news right now for apparently stealing some Microsoft source code. They essentially they posted these screenshots to a Telegram group, and they were showing all the internals from that they'd stolen from Okta, and basically they had supposedly gotten in through a third party support engineer that was working for one of their service providers. And it's kind of scary because a lot of people or a lot of businesses are reliant upon Okta to outsource their credential handling too. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how the story continues to unfold.
Yeah, I saw people say this is really messing up their security plans, because what they've been doing is telling all the businesses to move to 2FA, and the only practical way to do that is to outsource that to Okta. And so this may be another SolarWinds. Other people are saying, since they only dumped the screenshots now, but it happened in January, they've been using it to hack everybody since January. And the only reason they published it now is because they finally lost the account, which means they're probably in all kinds of other companies already. But that's only speculation.
Right. And, at first it was, well, we don't even know if this is a credible threat. Now it's like, this threat's probably pretty credible. You better go batten down the hatches and really kind of keep an especially good eye out. But, there's a lot going on in the security world. There are a lot of threats. So, and I'm not going to go on about that because I don't know if somebody else picked one of those stories, but it's definitely a time to be on high alert.
Well, what about Lapsus? Do we know what nation they're from or anything?
I personally don't.
Yeah. I wonder if this is a nation state actor or just a crimeware gang.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It seems like it used to be easier to tell.
Yeah.
And now those lines are blurred pretty good.
Yeah, well, we're all supposed to be getting hacked by Russia, and that's I guess, Alan's next story, the official statement by our president.
Yes, one of the mysteries of the war, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, is why Russia hasn't been more engaged in attacking other countries or even Ukraine using its cyber capabilities. And although there has been some activity in Ukraine specifically that we've discussed on this podcast previously, it really hasn't been the shock and awe cyber campaign that the Gerasimov doctrine of hybrid warfare would indicate. So the White House and President Biden have just come out with a statement, a warning really, saying that businesses around the US should be on heightened alert now because there's some intelligence indicating that Russia is seriously considering a cyber attack against American infrastructure. The US intelligence about this war in Ukraine has been generally quite good so far. The US called the invasion long before other governments did, even when the Ukrainian government was very skeptical of any forthcoming invasion. So this probably does have some real intelligence behind it. Not that it will actually happen, because it appears that the Russian government has not yet decided to pursue this course of action, but it's a real risk. And beyond that, the US government isn't making any very specific statements other than to also link to various support websites that encourage businesses to harden their networks, et cetera, et cetera. So even though no cyber attack has happened thus far, we may see that happening very soon here.
I was very pleased with their list of things to do. I remember like 5 or 10 years, 5 years ago, they had this stupid threat level that was always orange and nobody knew what to do about it.
Yes.
And now he has a list of like 10 things to do. And it's just like a chapter from any of our books. We now seem to have converged on a good list of best practices like multi-factor authentication, put on your patches and stuff like that.
Yes, and they've got a dedicated website for this and all that. So they seem to be doing a much better job of communicating concrete steps that businesses can take. Now, of course, the larger businesses already should be doing all these things. And
Like going through Okta.
yes, like going through Okta, exactly. So maybe that's related, maybe not. We'll find out soon enough.
Yep. All right. And so then I thought this was great. In LA, there's apparently a hill. I've read books about it called Echo Park. There's apparently an awesome hill. And apparently, if you take a Tesla and you go fast enough, you can fly off the road and go right over somebody's house and land on another road. And so somebody did that and totally wrecked his car and skidded down the street and totally trashed another car. And then the people in the car ran out, jumped in another Tesla and scrammed, leaving the wrecked Tesla abandoned there. And all the neighbors are sort of fed up saying, hey, man, you wrecked my car. You jumped over my house. What's wrong with you idiots? But I've been hearing an awful lot of misdeeds of a Tesla. So anyway, apparently Teslas are powerful enough to jump over a car or jump over a house and then land in wreckage on the other side.
Apparently, according to the internet, it was a rental Tesla also. And
Oh, great.
yeah, and the people who got their vehicles destroyed are like totally SOL right now. And they're not very happy about it.
I mean, if you rent a car and wreck it, when you rented it, presumably they took your driver's license, they know who you are. They can't go after these people. And
I think it's going to be pretty difficult for the people who got their cars wrecked to figure out where this guy rented it from so they can pursue insurance claims. And also, a lot of these folks like Sam and I, for example, I don't, there's no reason to have full coverage insurance on my car. Probably not on yours either, Sam.
But I do have coverage for the people I might hit.
Yes.
That's liability. And that's what would be needed here, I would think.
It would be, but again, they're going to have the victims are in the unfortunate position of having destroyed cars and a project to try and track down. It wasn't like this guy went and knocked on doors or left a note on the windshield saying, hey, I'm sorry, I had pulled an Evel Knievel stunt and ruined your vehicle. Please call me.
But he left the wrecked car, and you can just look at the wrecked car to find the origin of the rental agency.
Well, I believe this happened in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So it's pretty plausible that folks may not have been out there before the Tesla got hauled away.
All right. Anyway, I would assume the cops would at least tell you who to get insurance coverage from, but I don't know.
And the thing that makes it more scary is the fact that this video went viral. So if you could imagine someone going on like one of those GoFundMe sites and being like, hey, my car got wrecked. And then because it's a viral video, you could imagine that they could get then takedown notices of the video that they put on for their GoFundMe. like there's so many things that could go wrong in this situation about not getting paid for your
yeah. Also, like if you drive an old crappy car, a lot of the time you're not going to get enough to replace it, especially with today's used car market.
Well,
and inflation.
Well, I've got advanced endpoint protection. If somebody wrecked my car, I don't think I could claim that it had a high value anyway. But anyway,
Yeah, one thing I've been noticing is that the gas people, the gas suppliers, are very quick to raise gas prices as soon as the price goes up, but they're very slow to bring it back down when the price of oil goes back down. And I think this is very true of pretty much all industries, where if you have hyperinflation, then they're kind of going to be a little slow on making sure you get properly compensated for your car. Whereas, you know, if inflation were going down, if you had deflation, they'd be very quick to point out, oh, well, that's not worth as much as it was a week ago.
all right. Well, we're back to you, Kaitlyn, with the Mac.
Yes, Max, Apple's in the news again because of their wonderful business practices. So The Verge has another article, and this one's written by James Gartenberg, talking about the Mac Studio. So when Apple revealed the Mac Studio, I thought this was the bee's knees. I was like, finally, like this is actually a really good Mac that's not ridiculously overpriced, that's powerful. You could do some really cool stuff with it. I mean, this if I were to get a Mac, I would definitely be looking at the Mac Studio. It's almost like the old Mac Pros you used to get in those like aluminum cases. Like it just looks amazing. And to top it off, the Mac Studio has a replacement, or sorry, an SSD that can be taken out. It's not soldered on. Unfortunately, it turns out that Apple is up to their own old business practices and decided that what they should do is have software locks. So if you were to try to replace the SSDs, which is just like one of those standard SSDs you would find in any computer, if you were trying to upgrade it and replace it yourself with something better, the software would stop you from doing that.
Neat. So clearly you just need to hack the software and turn that off.
Oh, I mean, clearly that needs to happen. But it does go to show that, same leopard, old spots sort of thing.
Like Windows Genuine Advantage.
Yes.
All right. And then we got Liz with Avos Locker. What's that?
So this is pretty interesting. Essentially this a new term that I learned within the last year was ransomware as a service, which is how this article in the Register described this Avos Locker group. So essentially, once they hit their targets, this description is just mind-blowing to me, but essentially they figure out how they can, and I assume that this is in large part automated, figure out what they can get out of a target, how they can, how much stuff that they can access, and then there are apparently subscribers to this service, and essentially they sell access to these third party to these targets that they have compromised. And I mean, it's really pretty incredible. They keep adding new features and support for targeting new systems. And I mean, some of this stuff seems a little more sophisticated with better customer service than a lot of legitimate digital service products that we know and use every day. I mean, it's to the point where you can even outsource your extortion and negotiation. Like they'll handle that for you. I guess you just pay them a commission. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it reminds me of Lapsus. I think they work by just bribing insiders, which is the obvious way to get in.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, there was a mention of that in that other article where they had gotten like an IT support technician or something like that.
Yeah, I saw an article a week or two ago of it. They just have ads. This much money for letting us on your machine here, implanting this software.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's actually a quite efficient way to get the job done, I guess. You don't need to
Yeah.
bother finding a security hole anymore, other than the old-fashioned security hole that you have people working for you.
Well, we like to say crime doesn't pay, but apparently it does. And the FBI says, watch out, because this group's hitting our critical infrastructure, utilities and so on.
Well, Scott Galloway says that crime is the fastest way to make money fast. It's the fastest way to grow. Anyway. All right. So Alan's got, the vaccination status might predict your views on Ukraine.
Yes, I don't know if this is surprising now, since we know so much about how disinformation works these days and the nexus of anti-vax and authoritarian sympathetic viewpoints. But the Canadian polling firm Ecos has conducted a survey from March 9th to March 13th of over 1,000 Canadians, and found that there is a very, very strong correlation between people who are not vaccinated and have sympathetic views of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And I'm not talking about slight correlation. It is an overwhelming correlation. People who have 3 or more shots of COVID vaccine are 86% in favor of imposing tougher economic sanctions on Russia. But people who are totally unvaccinated for COVID, only 13% are in favor of those tougher economic sanctions. And this holds for pretty much all of the questions, such as sending additional military equipment, providing additional loans and non-military aid to Ukraine, seizing assets of Russian oligarchs. People who have 3 shots are overwhelmingly in favor, about 80% or more. People who are unvaccinated are strongly against that, 20% or below for this.
So what this means is that we are brainwashed sheeple mindlessly obeying our overlords taking the shots and believing
something like that. Yes, exactly.
As the heroic rebels that deny everything are few.
Yeah, well, that's right. But they see the truth, evidently, and they are true believers. And apparently, this is not simply a spontaneous political alignment or favoritism of Russia. There is some disinformation campaigns going on online. Even though Russia's generally run a very poor propaganda war during its invasion, and Ukraine really has been extremely successful, especially President Zelensky, in gaining support from Europe and North America. There have been some Russian attempts to also cultivate its usual backers in the US and Canada, and they are clearly having some success with that very small constituency.
Well, I would say that what it shows is that Russians understand Americans very well. They totally know what lies will sell over here, but they don't understand Ukrainians at all. And I think this is a very common thing, that you can't see what's under your nose.
Apparently so. That's true. Yes.
And, they said, from what I'm reading, Putin actually believed that the Ukrainians would welcome him with open arms, and they really want to be Russians and everything.
Or you could also say that Ukrainians simply have a much stronger sense of nationhood than Americans.
Well, maybe, but on the other hand, nobody has actually invaded America. I think if somebody actually landed troops here and started killing people, we would suddenly decide we're all on the same side in a hurry.
I can see Tucker Carlson not saying that.
I can't. I think even Tucker Carlson would say, these people that are actually here killing our people, we need to fight back. But I don't know. Anyway, all right. And so then we've got the 737 crashed in China. And this is getting people worried. When I first heard it, I said, well, it's probably one of those 737 MAXs, but it's not. It's the older 737 that has an excellent safety record. And they say it is very unusual for it to crash like this. It didn't crash on takeoff or landing, which is when things usually go wrong. It was cruising and then suddenly just nosedived right into the ground. And they don't do that. They're tiptoeing right up to the line of saying, well, it must be human pilot error is the only thing that would cause that. But anyway, they're we're waiting for the investigation. They've grounded 737s all over the place, waiting for the answer here. It is quite mysterious. There'll certainly be a lot more coming out about that, but this was not a normal plane crash at all. It was the safest kind of plane. So we must wait and see if they actually discover the black box and figure out what happened here. And then we got Kaitlyn, who has got AIs doing psychiatry.
Well, not only that, psychoreactive drugs.
The AI gives you
What?
drugs.
Yes. So what could possibly go wrong with artificial intelligence and mind-altering drugs? I mean, they go together like mac and cheese. So interestingengineering.com has an article, doesn't say by whom, talking about how AI is looking at the way psychotropic drugs like magic mushrooms are interacting with the brain and the end goal is to create medicines to treat depression by looking at and studying these psychotropic drugs. So basically what's going on is that the AI is going to be watching people take drugs and then mapping what goes on in the brain and trying to make connections and come up with new stuff to make money. So nothing could possibly go wrong here. This is amazing.
How do they measure what's going on in the brain with
You asked too many questions, Sam.
magnetic resonance or something? I mean,
You're clearly asking too many questions.
a bag of work. I mean, one of the big problems, of course, with this is it's not entirely clear what constitutes making you more mentally healthy.
Once again, you're asking way too many questions.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what I do. Yeah. Although I must say, I'm in general in favor of them using the street drugs for valid psychiatric purposes. In my opinion, the reason they're street drugs is because the vast majority of people have discovered that they make you feel better and without enormous side effects. So they probably should be used in legitimate psychiatric treatment.
Well, I mean, okay, so let's kind of be serious for a second. So yes, most drug use is self-medication. So people have issues and they found a drug that helps them do better, especially on the short term. The problem is that a lot of these drugs have very dangerous long-term stuff that needs to be addressed, and we should not be giving people, for example, people who have depression are sometimes on the short term very much helped by drinking to excess. Now that does not make it a proper medicine, Sam.
Well, sure. But I mean, the point is, what we've been doing is putting them on Schedule 1, and you can't even do any research on them or anything. Whereas I would say they are probably the best drugs to be researched because clearly they do have some benefits, or people wouldn't be taking them for fun.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Anyway, all right. And Liz has got Citizen coming back. Boy, I thought these guys were gone.
Oh, no. They are not gone. In fact, they are here and doing increasingly foolish things. They're quite popular, in fact.
Now, Citizen is basically just a flash mob of vigilantes, right?
Oh, yeah, but now it's new and improved. So essentially, it started out as this app that was kind of, at the beginning, it's kind of interesting and useful. It had you could look at a map and it would pop up like various crimes in progress in your area. So, it'd be like, well, don't go down 45th Street. The road is blocked because there was a shooting or whatever. So it's kind of nice for avoiding going on. Why are there 500 sirens like 2 blocks over? Mm-hmm. But it has morphed into something a lot more sinister with an integration. They've tried a pilot. They tried one in LA, and now they're doing one in Chicago where they're partnering with a private security firm. And this is becoming more of a thing. There are people doing this in San Francisco too, and this is one of the sort of the downsides to some of the attempts that have been made towards criminal justice reform in certain places where it starts out with a good intent to not incarcerate as many people over low-level offenses, which is a good thing. There's no reason to really lock up somebody who, stole $30 worth of groceries. However, it's kind of turned into something different where especially in places like San Francisco and in Chicago, we're doing a lot of catch and release, no bail, which again at the outset is a good thing, because at the beginning we think, well, the whole cash bail system's an inherently inequitable system and keeps a lot of people, and essentially serves to just keep poor people locked up. The problem is that in practice, what's happened is with a lot of the in a lot of the catch and release jurisdictions, people are getting caught, released, committing more crimes, getting caught, released, and committing even more, like an escalating and sometimes they're escalating in levels of violence. And this has sort of bred a culture of fear in a lot of people who think, well, the cops aren't here to protect me, so I'd better hire my own private security. And some people think this is great because it overall means less police. Other people like me are concerned that it's going to turn into South Africa, where you've got these untrained, zero accountability, armed vigilantes or mercenaries, and there's no, it's kind of turns into the wild west.
So you get this app, you pay them a fee, and then they send private security guards to your location to save you?
I guess so. I guess that's how it works.
Sort of like Blackwater.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
Well, I do understand it. Many people are very frustrated at the level of crime, and the police and cops seem to not do anything. So the next logical step is to hire your own private cops.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, it's bad when you have a society where people don't feel safe walking down the street, and unfortunately we're there, and part of that, we're still experiencing a lot of violent attacks on elderly Asian people.
Yeah.
Here, at least here in the Bay Area. I mean, I'm not sure if that's still going on in other places.
In New York City, it's going on. In New York City, it's going on. And I know London Breed said she was going to stamp out crime in the Tenderloin, and then followed that by not even showing up at the city council meeting about it, and then taking a vacation in Europe when it's actually implemented. So apparently it's all coming to a disaster like I thought it would, but she gave a tough speech about it.
And I mean, I don't necessarily think you can expect people to not do anything to protect themselves and just continue to be victims. So there are no easy answers to it, but
there's a simple answer, which is they're going to get Republicans. This is how you get Republicans. When you just and then again, we talk about unintended bad consequences. Yep. But this is how you get characters like Giuliani that just trample everybody's rights and fix the problem with a hammer. Anyway, all right. So Alan has showed up with more stuff about SARS or COVID.
It has not left. In fact, COVID's more of a problem in Hong Kong than ever before, to the extent that they've essentially abandoned their zero COVID strategy. Mm-hmm. And BA2, Omicron BA2 variant, is now really taking off throughout Western Europe, including the UK and Denmark. And it's becoming more and more prevalent in the US.
Right.
So
Heard that.
We're not done with COVID, even if some people, including the administration, seem to think that the worst is behind us. This study, published in Cell, shows that in infections that are vaccine breakthroughs, the ones what's called cross-neutralizing immunity is much more limited with Omicron than with previous variants, such as Delta. And so the 4 highlights are that in the event of a breakthrough infection, this is an infection of a person who's previously vaccinated, then the immunity is limited. And also, somebody who has a severe infection is going to have higher antibody levels or titers than somebody who has a mild infection. And then Delta breakthroughs have nearly 11 times higher antibody titers compared to Omicron. And the rise in antibody titers from Omicron breakthroughs was just 1/3 of that from boosting. So the big takeaways from this is that for whatever reason, Omicron elicits a much weaker antibody response from people who are previously vaccinated. And in many cases, since people get a milder infection post vaccination, the immune system produces fewer antibodies. So they're less protected from future infections of Omicron. And also and this is enough of a difference so that somebody who's infected once with Omicron can become reinfected just a matter of months later. So there's all this talk about wall of immunity, about past infections being protective, is only true so far to a certain extent, a rather limited extent.
You think we're going to have an Omicron 2 peak and have to lock everything down again?
Well, lockdowns are a governmental response. So there's no predicting what the government will do.
So we'll have a peak and just ignore it.
Probably.
You know, what I read is that we've stopped reporting cases. California has 10 days ago. So the apparent lack of growth of cases is not because they aren't growing. It's because we're no longer reporting the numbers.
Yes. Yeah. And that seems to be the policy in most places.
So
And
you
not just
bury
in
your
the
head in the
US,
sand and pretend
incidentally. This
everything's
is
okay.
This is something that's being done globally. Many countries, including countries that were previously very effective in controlling COVID, such as Denmark.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cheerful. So we might have a rising cases and not even know it.
That's right. And then when people get infected, they're minimally protected because their antibody titers are still quite low. And then,
Well, everything I've heard says that if you're vaccinated, it still protects you from severe cases and death.
that's right. It is highly protective for a time, but that protection does decline.
Well,
So
that's why we need
especially-
another booster. And they seem to
that's
be doing
right.
that. Yeah.
That's right. And so Moderna has filed for a 4th booster, or 4th
And so has
shot.
Pfizer.
Yes, as has Pfizer. That's right. And there may be some reason to do that, although there may also be some good reasons not to do that because of what's called original antigenic sin. And it's a very colorful term. It describes the interesting phenomenon in which prior infection or prior vaccination can actually lower the body's effectiveness in fighting off subsequent infections.
What?
Yeah.
That's awful. Wait a minute.
This is a real phenomenon, and this is why the vaccine for dengue fever was such a catastrophic failure. The interesting thing is that the immune system responds most strongly to the original pathogen that it was infected by, or the vaccine that it was first inoculated with. And if that pathogen then evolves sufficiently that it's still kind of similar to the original, but it's also sufficiently different from the original, the body's immune response is going to gear up to fight off the original pathogen, but that won't actually be sufficient to fight off the new updated form of the pathogen.
So this suggests that there could be a mutant form that actually makes the anti-vaxxers right, that by not getting the vaccine, they're actually more protected.
Yes, but I'm sure they don't know the first thing about immunology.
Well, no, but of course we don't have that variant as far as we know yet, right? I mean, this is just sort of a nightmare scenario.
Well, it already is true to some extent. Just to give some context with with dengue fever, for example, there are 4 major strains of dengue fever.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you are, and somebody who contracts one of these major strains of dengue fever will usually recover from it, even though it's a horrible, horrible experience, apparently. But if they are then subsequently infected with one of the 3 other strains, then they will become very, very sick, because the immune system does recognize the dengue fever infection, but it's pumping out antibodies against the first strain that was exposed to, rather than to the updated new strain that it's just been exposed to.
But as far as COVID goes, I think right now there's no question that being vaccinated is better than not being vaccinated.
And that's absolutely true, that there is definitely some protection.
Yeah.
But we already see that there are so many breakthrough infections. After several months with only 2 doses, vaccine is only about 30% protective
Against infection, but it still remains effective against death.
severe disease and death. Although that,
Well, I'll take that.
Yeah, right.
Not
It's better
dying
than
is a good
nothing.
thing.
It's definitely better than nothing.
Yeah.
But we've seen how quickly COVID has evolved, or SARS-CoV-2 has evolved, and it almost certainly will continue to do so. And so at some point, you have to wonder if the vaccines will stop being effective altogether. Hasn't happened.
They should update them like the flu vaccine, like a different one every year or something, right?
Yes, but that may not work, again, because of original antigenic sin.
Well, it works for the flu.
But flu is a different virus altogether.
I guess. Okay. Well,
And COVID is a different virus than dengue. Yeah. So
hopefully that horrible thing that you described doesn't happen. If it does, I don't know what we're going to do.
Well, our data sets aren't great either, because the other thing that we're discovering is that there's a pretty high incidence of death. One study from University of Oxford said 5 times higher study of instance of death in the following 10 months post-infection. So, I mean,
Wait, what is 5 times higher?
your chance of dying in the 10 months after you recover from a COVID infection is
so
5 times higher than normal, because people are
Right. Okay. So previous infection doesn't provide immunity as much as it sort of wounds you.
Well, I don't think that there's any concrete answer on that.
Yeah.
And I don't think that it's necessarily the same from person to person.
Right. Well, that might be long COVID. I mean, there's a bunch of people that when they get infected, they actually take permanent damage from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so clearly the solution is for people not to get vaccinated and to take ivermectin instead, and have our message spread all across YouTube. And
well, this is important. I know Kaitlyn has to say that because otherwise YouTube will block our videos. So okay.
Right. So just to be clear, if we are very factual and we just state what's in the most recent papers, we will get blocked on YouTube. But if I say something like, let's eat ivermectin and not get vaccinated, then our videos will stay up. So I just want to make sure that people have access to our content.
Well, there you go. You also want to make sure we have that high quality content. All right. Well, in order to continue this serious conversation, I've got the Florida man. So Florida men have figured out, and they don't tell you how it works. There is a gadget they can put inside the gas pump called a pulsator, which causes it to give you gas for only a few pennies a gallon. So they are driving up big tanker trucks and filling it up for a few pennies per gallon and then reselling that gas at $5 a gallon. And they finally caught them and busted them. They got the mugshots of these 4 guys in the gang. So this sounds like a pretty good scam. And I'd sort of like to see one of those pulsators and find out how it works. But anyway, that's another hacking project for people. And I think that's it for this one. It being Tuesday, we'll be back on Friday.